Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here this afternoon. We're going to get started. These lights are a little crazy in here, and I'm fighting with my glasses, so I'll take those off. I'm Gini Breidenbach. I am a restoration program manager at Minnesota Land Trust here in Duluth. And I've had the privilege of working for the last 7 or so years here at the Land Trust on the St. Louis River Estuary and Lake Superior. And I'm going to share with you today some really cool work that I've been focused on for the past 4 years, the Lake Superior Headwaters Sustainability Partnership. I am the coordinator of the partnership right now, was the project manager for its development. There are many, many people who have been involved in this, so I'm just one of the many folks that made this happen, and a number of them are sitting in this room right now. Before I get started, I want to figure out who's sitting in the room with me. So if you are not from the Duluth Superior area, would you raise your hand? Okay, awesome. If you are someone who works for a municipality or a state agency or a federal agency, would you raise your hand? You got some of this. I like that answer. That's a good one. What's that? Yeah, I'm going to get there. If you're a volunteer, if you're here as a volunteer, raise your hand. Okay, awesome. If you're here in your role as working with like an interest group of some sort, volunteer is a good one, but if you're here in another more official capacity as a representation of a interest group, okay, awesome, great. Let's see, who did I miss? Nonprofits? One of those? Okay, nonprofits, yay, okay, great. How about commercial interests? Yay, awesome. Okay, thank you so much. Just wanted to get a feel for that. So I don't know what my problem is with making presentation titles. This is kind of a crazy one, so I'm just going to move on to the next slide. I've had this problem the last few presentations I've given. So in my talk today, we're going to be a little interactive here because it's the end of the day. You all have had a long day together. And this is what I'm going to be covering. We're going to start out with some definitions of big words that we're using in this presentation. And I'm going to give you a little background on the development of the partnership, how it came about. I'm going to talk just briefly about the structure of collaborative partnerships because I am a planning nerd and I find that very fascinating. And it also may be applicable as you're thinking about the work that you do and the work with others. I'm going to then share with you the framework of the partnership and really focus more on the community engagement goal that we have and the objectives around that. That's really kind of what I want to be sharing out to you all. Two things, this really cool collaboration that we have going, and then where we're headed in the future on that. And then some time for questions. And if you don't ask me questions, then I'm asking you questions, so be ready. So definitions. I'm going to ask my colleague Emmy to just gather a few notes as we're going on. I'm curious for you all, when you hear the word stewardship, what does that mean to you? And so if anyone wants to call out, what does stewardship mean to you? Respect. Awesome. Caretaking. We're also giving Emmy forgiveness for any spelling errors. Yeah. Respect, caretaking, money, engagement. Anyone else? What's that? Ownership. Yeah, ownership. Okay. Service. Emmy, are you keeping up? Good job, Emmy. Okay. Anyone else? Stewardship. Responsibility. Multi-generation. Reciprocity. Responsibility. multi-generation. Yes, Sarah, you can get up there with another marker. Multi-generation. There's one I missed there that, thank you, reciprocity. All right. Awesome. So I'm going to give you a couple of definitions from some of the folks that, the federal agencies. Not necessarily everybody that works for NOAA takes this as a definition, but here's one that NOAA uses. The responsible use and protection of the natural environment through conservation and sustainable practices to enhance ecosystem resilience and human well-being. And another one from EPA, environmental stewardship is the responsibility for environmental quality shared by all those whose actions affect the environment. So we're getting at some of these awesome words that you all shared. But stewardship is like a big word, and when I first started working at the Land Trust, it was not a word that was in my vernacular, so I didn't want to just gloss over this. So we're talking about what it really means to us. So the next one is collaboration. What does collaboration mean to you all? What do you think of when you think of collaborating? Communication? Relationships. Community? Consensus. Team. One of my favorite words, team. Synergy. Are you getting it, Mommy? Team and synergy. Respect for differences. Amplification. Listening. Any more? Equity. Okay, awesome. Consensus? Did you get all the rest of them then? Yeah. Okay, awesome. So, collaboration, the state of having shared interests or efforts. Now, this is from my perspective in this collaboration. The work and activity of a number of persons who individually contribute towards the efficiency of the whole. So again, we're getting at some of these with what you've shared. And in the case of the Headwaters Partnership, the collaboration that we're doing is about increasing the capacity, people, infrastructure, and dollars to have greater effects on landscape stewardship. Okay, so somebody mentioned reciprocity. Another really important word is reciprocal, or reciprocity, reciprocal relationship. Whoops, stop. So now, when you think of the word reciprocal or reciprocity, what do you think of there? Balance. Mutual support. Anyone else? Great. My friend just sent me this picture of two monkeys doing that. She's in Africa right now. It's great. great visual. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Anyone else? Reciprocity or reciprocal relationship is not a term that we have used often in the context of stewardship and collaboration. Did you get them all? Okay. And so, but this one is really interesting because it really ties into both stewardship and collaboration. And so the semi-official definition, because it's on the slide, this is how I think of reciprocal relationship. Reciprocal is the conscious acknowledgement of what you receive from nature. And then giving back. After you've recognized that, how do you give back? On the individual level, on the community level, on the global level. So these are 3 terms that you're going to see and we're going to talk about through this presentation. Thanks, Emmy. I feel like I should call it Emmy Vanna, but let's do that. Thank you. So now talking a little bit about the Headwaters Partnership and how it came to be and what it is. So the Headwaters Partnership is a voluntary collaborative. It is non-regulatory in nature. It's non-programmatic in nature. It's meant to be a landscape level collaboration for stewardship. It's by state, so Minnesota, Wisconsin, and tribal. So we have 4 ceded territories within the landscape. I'll show you a map in just a minute, as well as much of the Fond du Lac Reservation. And the Minnesota Land Trust is currently coordinating it. And this partnership came to be from a group of folks working in natural resources management who were really interested in the future of the estuary, the St. Louis River Estuary, and our whole headwaters area to Lake Superior, and what the future of that looks like. How do we collaborate together to really address some of these larger landscape level issues that we have going on, things like invasive species, climate change, like the really, really difficult problems that needed a vision and a way for us to work together to get them. So while this is a collaboration amongst folks in the natural resources community and nonprofits, local, state, federal, tribal organizations involved, it really is like the idea of a bunch of geeks who really geek out on natural resources and how do we do a better job with that. And so that's what I'm sharing with you. The Headwaters Partnership region, we defined it as the boundary of the St. Louis River area of concern. For those of you who are from out of town, the St. Louis River area of concern is a project in progress for cleaning up one of the most contaminated places in the Great Lakes. There's been a huge synergy of partners working to get massive amounts of work done in this area, and it's going to be done in a few years. And then what's next? And so that's where the partnership comes into play. So we're down here, Superior, Duluth, the Fond du Lac Reservation. We have a whole bunch of other communities. We have Oliver in Wisconsin. We have Proctor and Rice Lake and Cloquet. And the lower 39 river miles of the St. Louis River are within this very large area. So the Headwaters Partnership is an intentional collaboration and information sharing framework. Has a forum of partners that I'll talk about in a minute with a funded coordinator position and a common agenda and set of tools. And the very basis from the very get-go when we started this collaboration is we wanted to have a new idea for how we deal with natural resources management. And this is what we put out to partners as the idea, and it stuck. Is that natural resources management intersects with economic development and it intersects with community health and well-being. And in the middle there is the sustainable landscape, okay? You can put an S on that if you'd like in the beginning. So the idea is like looking for that sweet spot in the middle of all our work that sustains the natural resources, our economic health, and our community health. And we realized that we don't know, as natural resources management folks, we don't know everything about economic development and community health, but we're starting from that spot, and we're intentionally working out and understanding the intersections between those other sectors. So that's the basis of our partnership, and as we began development of it, that was the very basis. And now we're going to just talk for a moment about the structure of collaboration, because it's really quite interesting. When you're working within a collaborative effort, this is a figure that talks about the building blocks of that. So there's 7 components, and at the top is you have this collective purpose and goals why are you collaborating together? And then there's shared strategies and priorities. Then there's this whole wide area of collaborative practices, skills, and tools. That's like how we actually do this collaborative work together. What do we need, and what skills do we need to grow to do that? There's coordination capacity, systems and infrastructure. How do you communicate and share information with each other? And then there's decision-making structures. Someone called out consensus for one of our definitions. What are the decision-making structures that happen within a collaboration? And on the outside of this, there's some really, the basically binding elements, the perimeter. You have to have a collaborative mindset, inclusive culture, and meaningful relationships. And so when all of those things are in play, the idea is that then all of the folks, this is the same figure, but the next spoke out, the next wheel around the edge is all of the folks involved. The private landowners, the nonprofits, the communities, the scientists and funders, indigenous communities, government, all of those different folks involved in this collaboration so that we can get to that outer circle of things like biodiversity, climate, habitat, water, wildfire. We don't have, well, yes, we do have wildfire issues here sometimes. Tribal sovereignty, equity, economy, and regeneration, all of those big things that we're working together towards. So I was talking then specifically about the Headwaters Partnership framework. And this is, this is more detailed information about how we're structured. So when you're thinking about, if you're local folks, how you're going to get engaged as we move forward, or how you desire, what do you want to know about it? This is like sharing for you so you can understand, what this thing is more detailed about. If you're from out of town, this is, I would say, idea sharing for you as you're thinking about your work and how you can collaborate within your areas. So the Headwaters Partnership Framework consists of the people, the vision, the geography, and the priorities. And then we have some more like tool level things, the restoration visions that I'm going to share with you, and decision support tools. So I'm going to just briefly talk about these different components. So the people side of things, when we first started out, we had a very narrow view initially from our previous experience and how we do natural resources planning and things like this, of how this might work. And this is what it was, that we have a forum of folks that are with a coordinator that are kind of representing interests within the natural resources community, and that would be dedicated to kind of reviewing and advising on all of the pieces of the partnership. And then that forum interacts with the teams of folks that are involved with the priorities that we've defined, and then all of the partners that are implementing natural resources work within our area. So that was our starting place. And the Headwaters Partnership Forum is made up of representatives. There's about 10, maybe 11 now, representatives from these communities and agencies. So it's the City of Superior, City of Duluth, Fond du Lac Band, the Lake Superior Reserve, DNRs from Minnesota and Wisconsin, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, EPA, and Fish and Wildlife Service. And those in bold have signed a memorandum of understanding, agreeing to collaborate on the priorities of the partnership. It's a 5-year MOU that was signed by all of those folks, like dedicating time and commitment to this effort. The vision, I'm going to read this to you because I think it's important to understand the vision statement that we established early on in this process. This is about 4 years ago now, 3 years ago maybe. The Lake Superior Headwaters Sustainability Partnership establishes an inclusive and intentional framework for how and where we work to achieve a thriving estuary landscape and community. The principles of sustainability, resiliency, and equity guide our approach to managing our natural resources by including economic development and community health and well-being considerations. In a collaboration, if you remember that, the triangle that I showed you, the idea of having kind of a shared vision is like way up at the top. It's like super important. And this vision is the vision that we're like very committed to working on in the partnership. And I'm just circling the community. So we're not just focused on natural resources, we're focused on the community that we live in, meaning wherever you live within the area. So we have this very large geography, and this map is just to show you that this geography we recognize is very different. The things that are going on here, like in urban center of Duluth, are very different than what's happening on the Fond du Lac Reservation, are very different than what's happening on the upstream portions of the Nemadji River watershed in Wisconsin. And so we subdivided the geography into these 10 units. And that will come into play in a minute when I talk about the restoration visioning process. So establishing priorities for the collaboration, for the collaborative, this was a process, as I mentioned, of all of these natural resources folks that are really interested in the idea of how do we do a better job, like how do we reach out of our agencies, our organizations, and and honestly just hold hands with the other partners to make the work happen on a grander scale. And so we did a very long, intentional process of gathering input from folks on what they thought was important across the landscape. And this was focused, again, on the natural resources community. And so we have a set of system-wide priorities that we established. There were 30 organizations and about 70 different participants involved in this process. And we went through and looked at, had a series of workshops across the different areas within the landscape, those zones of different colors that I showed you, and took a look at all of the input and what was consistently coming up over and over again throughout those areas, and came up with these 12 priorities, which I'll share with you in a minute. For each one of those priorities, there were teams of folks that got together to define a goal statement for the priority and a set of objectives. So the priorities of the Headwaters Partnership, really that are maybe most focused in that green bubble, the natural resources management, are listed here: birds, monomen, name, brook trout streams, coastal wetlands, hydrologic integrity, invasive species, terrestrial habitat connectivity, water quality. And we have one priority that falls more within the economic development bubble, which is dredge material management, big issue for our wonderful working port. And then we have these two really important priorities that came out over and over again throughout the whole process from all of these folks working together, is that community engagement and environmental justice came out as top priorities. And so I'm focusing on how we're integrating now those community engagement goals and objectives and environmental justice goals and objectives into our work, the basis of our work as we're starting this implementation process. So, Emmy, now I'm going to ask you to come back up, please. When we look at natural resources priorities, so when you look at a list of things like birds, brook trout streams, hydrologic integrity, invasive species, those of us that do natural resources management work look at those things and understand, what those mean to us. But I am really curious, what does this translate to for you as you think about being a person, on the landscape? What does this land translate into? So this is like technical speak. What does like human being on the landscape get out of these things being healthy and supported and sustainable? Does anyone want to share? Is anyone still awake? Food, awesome, okay. All the beings. Health for food, health for people, animals, the planet, all the beings. Connected pathways. So like actual physical connected pathways of, yeah, okay, awesome. Treaty rights. Anyone else? Yeah, recreation. Stronger relationships. I wonder who said that. Thank you. Natural resources are people too. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Safety. Beauty. Economic opportunity. Sustainability. You can write, you can. Awe and inspiration. All right, anyone else? Okay, thanks, Emmy. Awesome. Yeah, so thank you for sharing these. These are the things that I will share. The first that sometimes we tend to forget about, from really a place of privilege that we've lived in within our natural resources environment, but we have human survival needs like clean air, clean drinking water, healthy food. Some of these came up. Flood control, that can be a big one depending on where you live, and resiliency, like sustainability, resiliency. We want this to be here in the future. Then we also have the place-based things and the things that we like to do there in these environments. Hold ceremony, gather food and medicines, have refuge in solitude. Lots of these were touched on. Experience community, hike, bike, birdwatch, run, ski, hunt, fish, paddle, sail. And that list could go on. So the work of the Headwaters Partnership in this first year, as we're getting started and probably going on into other years, is actually making that translation for folks and those connections with the people that live in this place, from how do our list of priorities for how we manage things translate into the way that this supports community health and well-being. And so the thing that we are gearing up to do over the next 2.5 years with funding from NOAA through the bipartisan infrastructure law is to do a set of what we're calling restoration visions, and I think this term will probably change as we move forward. But these visions, and I'm going to give you an example of them in just a minute, are a concept level vision for the future of the estuary and the watershed. And they identify the things we need to do to get towards those priorities that we just talked about. So restoration work, protection work, enhancement work, and then adding access and other things that we need to support the community. And the idea is that the partnership is facilitating the process of developing these visions, but then individual partners, whether it's Minnesota Land Trust or the DNRs from either state, or the Fond du Lac Reservation, or 1854 Treaty Authority, would be implementing projects or doing their work within, over time, on projects that fit within that larger vision. It's a multi-sector process, so again, community health, natural resources, and economic development considerations, meaningful community engagement, and environmental justice. Both of those pieces have to be incorporated based on our goals and objectives for the partnership. So just to give you an example of what this looks like, this is a prototype that we developed for Eloise Bay. So Eloise Bay is on the far, let's see, my brain is not working with directions right now, eastern portion and the lowest downstream portion. So one of the bays, part of our big Duluth Superior Harbor. And Eloise Bay is entirely within the city of Superior. And a couple years ago, we started a process with the natural resources community at looking at this beautiful location. What are the things that we needed to protect there that were good? What needed to be restored? What needed to be enhanced? And we spent time looking at all of our data and information and understanding from our technical point of view of this place and came up with this vision. The details of it are not important other than the idea that it's meant to be a representation of all of the things from our understanding right now that could be done over time to support the ecology and the socio-ecological health of this area. So we started from the natural resources basis, and then the Lake Superior Reserve did the work of going out into the communities of folks that live and love this area, live on it and love it, and got information about how did they respond to this vision? What are the ways that they use the area? Like the list of things we were talking about as far as, hunting, fishing, bird watching, what were the ways that they interacted or related to this place? And we actually got pretty good confirmation on what we had proposed and presented, but there were some things that we learned and that we added in. There's a need for access for these communities here on the lower side that have to otherwise drive all the way around to get access to the bay. And so we added pieces in there to support the ways that the community could connect in. And our vision for this process moving forward as we step through doing restoration visions through the rest of our geographic area is that community involvement portion is done in a very authentic and careful and responsive way, in a way that we've never done before. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So, as I mentioned, we have these priorities that were developed for the partnership, and teams developed a goal statement and a set of objectives for each one of them. This is a community engagement goal. Community engagement is prioritized and valued as essential to support a thriving socio-ecologic system in this lower St. Louis River. Communities connected to the river generate, inform, co-develop, contribute to, and evaluate the actions of the Headwaters Partnership with reciprocal responsiveness, resources, and support from the partnership. So that's our big sort of goal. That's what we have to figure out how we do and incorporate in all of our work. And there's specific sets of objectives too. So invest time and effort in building trusting and equitable community relationships and recognize that this process takes time. So this is one of the first objectives listed in the associated with that goal. Invest and establish an advisory council of representative community members. And so this is the work that we're just beginning now, is to identify and set up a process of inviting community members that represent the landscape, folks that are not in the natural resources community, not that don't work in our bubble in the sector, but that are out in the other bubbles that represent that diverseness that exists within our community, and a way to get totally different voices to the table than we've had before. And that community council will then design a community engagement process that will guide restoration and conservation actions conducted by the partnership across the region. And so the goal is not that the natural resources management folks are going to say, well, this is how we're going to engage. We're going to come to this meeting and that meeting, and you'll have this public involvement and that. That will not be up to us. It'll be driven by what the community wants and this community Advisory Council. So it's a very different way of moving forward with implementing engagement within this process. So this first year, our challenge is to work with the community and first convene that council and then work with them through a facilitated process to identify clear steps and points of engagement and input that will occur before, during, and after a major action. I know this is a lot of words. This is one of those weird projects where like you don't actually have pictures of things yet. So we're looking at words. So another one of the objectives is to build a sustained and accessible presence in the community through novel means of community engagement that utilize storytelling, visual and media arts, and outreach and educational events. So we realize that people relate to the world, to the natural world in different ways. I relate like in a super maybe nerdy way of like loving to identify all the trees, and I look at how the water flows on the landscape and all of these things that I know from my personal experience and interests. But that's not the way other people relate. Other people relate, through like, it's like beautiful photography or inspiration for writing or art and storytelling. And so we're recognizing that the way to develop these beautiful reciprocal relationships and support stewardship over the long term is to engage people where they are with the things that they're interested in. And so this work is an exciting opportunity that can be done through the engagement and involvement with other community organizations. And again, one other objective, identify and build cross-community partnerships between organizations outside of traditional land conservation organizations. I was just mentioning this, in order to foster long-term resilience and socio-ecological well-being. So these objectives are our challenge. And I want to also recognize that the partnership has a very strong goal for environmental justice that will be worked on in this first couple years of its development. And this is the goal. The outcomes of the Headwaters Partnership advance the multiple dimensions of environmental justice through protection and restoration of the St. Louis River Estuary ecosystems, equitable and sustainable revitalization of estuary communities, and promotion of reciprocal relationships between humans and nature. All right, one more slide. So I showed you that really stale-looking people slide at the beginning of the process, and this is the more exciting one. Once we went through this process of identifying the goals and objectives and priorities for the landscape, we came up with a much better way of how people will engage in this process. And so I just shared with you some of the objectives around this Community Advisory Council. The idea is that this Community Advisory Council will be the ones that are really identifying the community engagement and environmental justice principles, values, and processes we use. So those will inform the forum, and then everything will flow through them, everything that the priority teams and implementing partners and stakeholders do, the direct connection to community organizations, following those processes and principles, and then this diverse community is connected to the landscape. These are the folks that are going to make up the advisory council, and so we have this lovely process of flow of information and sharing, a much better people org chart for this process after we've gone through it. Okay. If you're interested in knowing more, if you're just like really interested in collaborative partnerships, if you want to know more because you live here, the headwaterspartnership.org website is a great spot. Right now, the tools and the information on the website are really focused on helping the natural resources folks collaborate. Over time, we're going to add many more components that are sharing for the partnerships in the community and other pieces that are more, let's say, everybody friendly. But there's a documents collection here if you're interested in reading more about the goals and objectives, or we have a scoping report, and we also have the Eloise Bay restoration concept on that site as well. All right. So now I'm going to entertain questions that you might have for me for a couple of questions on the partnership and what I've shared. And then I'm going to ask you some more questions. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'll go over here.
For the community, the people that are being involved, the committee, right? Is there a way that you're compensating or making sure that like people of all economic ranges can afford to participate in that?
Thank you for asking the question. The answer is yes. So that, yeah, oh, sorry, yes. So the question is, for the people that are going to be involved in this like community advisory council or in other ways like that within the partnership, is there a way that we are supporting them in doing that so that people of different economic situations can participate in? Yes, that is one of the things that was identified in some of the details of we intend to provide compensation for time and effort in this. Yeah. Yes. The question was, when did the partnership convene? So we started in the end, basically the beginning of 2019 in the development of the process. It was the end of 2022 when we, October of 2022 when we called it the official start of the partnership. So it's really, but that was a slow start because we were waiting for funding to come through. So it's really been about a year that it's been in kind of implementation status. Yes?
How did you interact with commercial entities and interests?
The question was, how did we interact with commercial entities and interests? Right now, that is a place where so far we have not had occasion to do that strongly yet. The Eloise Bay example that we started was a little bit of an easy choice for us because there weren't as many commercial interests in that area. It's much public and private land. But that's something moving forward that will come into play with the different restoration visions. And that will also be something we've got to figure out in the best way to do that. I will say, though, that the Port Authority has been at play at the table and helping us with that components around, I talked about dredge material management. So there has been some interaction, but it's not the full kind of spectrum yet. Anyone else with a question for me? Yes?
Now I'm very curiosity about what they do with the dredge material and why
Oh, okay, yeah. So we have this big river, and it flushes sediment down, and it gets basically stopped by Minnesota Point, Park Point, Minnesota and Wisconsin Points, and falls out in the harbor and kind of really the lower part of the river. And every year, the Corps of Engineers is responsible for managing the dredge material and navigation channel. And so every year there's about 100,000 cubic yards of sediment that has to be removed to support the ships being able to come in and out and of their turnaround and all the things that they need to do. And so every year it's a big deal of figuring out where that much sand needs to go. And habitat restoration work recently, there's been some very big projects where we have worked hard with the Corps of Engineers to kind of figure out ways to use that material. The city of Duluth has been also doing it with beach nourishment. So it's a big challenge because it's a lot of material. Yes? So the question was, since I mentioned it was non-regulatory and non-programmatic, do we envision that there might be policy or lobbying components to it? I can't speak to the lobbying pieces of it. And the policy-related things, I would say, this is just my off-the-cuff response, are more related to how this collaboration and our priorities and the demonstrated partnership that we have influences some of the larger regional ways of doing business on the federal scale. So like we have an opportunity to, so like NOAA is funding us for this support because they see or for this work because they see the benefits of this large scale collaboration. EPA is interested from that standpoint. So over time, there's a potential for these collaborations, and there's another one just east of us in Superior that Wisconsin that we're tied in with, a little different, but similar. And so we see it's like a kind of a power in getting funding support and also being able to influence what the needs are of the community, the landscape, to have the federal folks pay attention. Anyone else with a question for me? Yes.
So this type of like collaboration seems like so crucial. I'm curious if you have considered or already have built some type of toolkit around how other communities can benefit from what they're being learned, or if there's an existing sort of playbook that you benefit.
Thanks for the question. So the question is, was there a toolkit that we benefited for in putting this together, or have we put one together to share out with other folks? Oh my gosh, I wish that I would have known had there been a toolkit when we were starting this process, because it was started from scratch. And now I know through a grant that we recently received that I'm now in a cohort of others that are doing landscape conservation all throughout the country through this Network for Landscape Conservation. So there are other people that are doing this kind of work. There was no toolkit that I knew of that was in existence. Those figures I shared for you are from other people's experience, the triangle figures, that suddenly I'm like, wow, there's actually words around this in vernacular like that. So I'm learning, and that's a good question of how to share it out with others, because it's really important. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, thank you for sharing that. That's really good for me to put in on the to-do list. We have been sharing our work with folks in Wisconsin that are doing similar things so that we can share our lesson learned, that they don't have to start from those same mistakes. So we have been doing some of that locally, but not in an official way. Thanks for the idea. Yes.
I'm curious if some of the damage to the estuary, the drainage area is caused by industry, and if so, are you working with them, going after them for responsibility to procure some funding or recoup the costs for any damage that they might have caused?
So the question is kind of the rightful assumption that some of the damage to the estuary was done by industrial activity, and has there been any effort to kind of go towards those industries as responsible to kind of recoup costs? That process is being done, has been done for the area of concern work. So the area of concern was designated because of historic, what we call legacy impacts to the area, and much of that has been, well, much of it, there was no responsible party because it happened so long ago, so you can't find them, but other work has been done. For example, the U.S. Steel Superfund site that is just celebrating some really big milestones. In that case, there was a responsible party involved. So the Headwaters Partnership is looking towards like really non-legacy sort of issues that you can't point a finger like that to particular. It's kind of those things that are outside of other programs, and really need this collaboration to figure out, how do we move forward on it. Anyone else? Okay, it's hard to see all these lights are so bright. Okay, let me see how much time we have. So we have just a little bit less than 10 minutes. And I have a couple of questions that I'm interested in hearing. I'm not all 4 of these, but I am interested actually in these bottom 2 bullet points. What are ways that, in your experience, for coming from the organizations, the volunteers, all of the folks here, how you like to be engaged when a process like this comes about? Like, what feels authentic to you when people are asking for your input in a process like that? Just kind of opening this conversation of like what feels like authentic engagement. I mean, do you want to be asked to the table in a certain point? Just asked to the table. Okay, awesome.
Very similar to mine. I was going to say, like, being reached out to directly instead of just this broad, like, community announcement or something saying, like, there's going to be a meeting or send us your information. Like, being reached out to as a stakeholder, a known stakeholder, and going door to door type of thing. Saying, like, we want to know about it.
Yeah. Okay, so like individual invitation. Yes.
Yeah, I'd say closure. Closure is all we've all been in those meetings where it's gone on in perpetuity and no action.
Okay. Great. Love it. Closure. Yes.
How do I say this? Actionable scope of engagement. So at the same time limiting, so not asking for, clearly delineating what feedback is wanted, and at the same time only then that feedback needs to be incorporated. So not asking, clearly defining things that limit the answers that are not on the table to only things that are actionable, and at the same time accepting those.
Okay, yes. So let me see if I can paraphrase this. So it's like the idea of sometimes we come into meetings and it's like it seems like every possibility is still open, but really, behind the scenes there's like 5 that have been already shut down and you really are only commenting on 2. Yeah.
Really eliminate those, and then at the same time the two open, then
Accepting the, yeah. Okay. So honesty in the request for information, I would say, maybe, or clear scope of the request. Clear, realistic. Yeah, good. Yes. And so then when the feedback is given, that it's considered, or the input is given, it's considered, and what did you say, Kirsten? And accepted. Yeah, incorporated. Okay. So and clarity on who you represent, or who you're being asked to represent. Yep. And then making sure if you're the individual representing a group that you have actually that person has actually connected with the group, so they're representing the group. So you can put an arrow. I'm challenging Emmy. Emmy, yeah, okay, yeah, did your homework. Good. Thank you. That's awesome. Anyone else? It's a hand up. Oh, Molly, hi. So alternative methods for feedback, email in parentheses. Yeah, good. Good. Thank you. Anyone else have something to add to this list? Okay. So before I go any further, I want to recognize some folks in the room, and since I can't really see, you're gonna have to self-select yourself, but I'm seeing at least 4 in this field of view right now. If you have been involved with the Headwaters Partnership and given input and helped with this process, would you wave your hand in the air right now? Okay, awesome. Thank you. And I do want to recognize Molly over here, Molly Wick, who is the leader of the environmental justice team. She has been a really awesome resource for this process. Kirsten Rude with the Lake Superior Reserve is actually helping with coordination of this effort through funding through NOAA. Diane, sitting behind her, was on the Headwaters Partnership Forum before she retired and decided to volunteer for everything under the sun. And Daryl at the Land Trust was like very involved with the initial like pulling your hair out, how are we going to do this sort of phases of this project. With that, I'm going to thank you all so much for sharing your time with me and with us. Emmy, thank you. Thank you for your input. Thank you for your interest. And hopefully I didn't even put my email or anything. If you go to headwaterspartnership.org, you'll find my contact information. If you have things that you want to follow up with me on, I'm happy to answer questions or have a phone conversation. Thanks so much for being a part of today also.